The screen opens with a microscopic view of a snowflake. It's a fragile hexagonal crystal. Then the camera pulls back rapidly, revealing billions of these crystals forming a massive, blue-tinted wall of ice. This is the starting point of our journey. To speak of the Geirangerfjord is to speak of the ice, the primary architect of the Norwegian soul. For over 2 million years, during the Pleistocene epoch, the Earth underwent a series of massive cooling events. Huge ice sheets, some over 3 kilometers thick, covered the Scandinavian peninsula. Under their own immense weight, these glaciers began to flow, behaving like a slow-motion river of solid lead. As they moved toward the coast, they didn't just slide over the land, they consumed it. They acted as giant sheets of sandpaper, embedded with rocks and boulders that ground down the ancient Precambrian basement rock. This process, known as glacial plucking and abrasion, carved out the deep, narrow valleys with steep sides and flat bottoms that we now call fjords. When the last great ice age ended approximately 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, the glaciers melted and the sea levels rose, flooding these deep scars. Geiranger is one of the most spectacular results of this violent birth. It is a 15-kilometer-long branch of the Storfjord, a sapphire ribbon winding through mountains that seem to reach for the heavens. The geology here is dominated by gneiss and granite, some of the oldest rocks on the planet. These stones have witnessed the drifting of continents and the birth of oceans. When you touch the wet walls of the fjord, you are touching history that dates back 1.5 billion years. The sheer verticality of the fjord, stretching nearly 1,500 meters above the water and plummeting nearly 300 meters below it, creates a sense of claustrophobic majesty that is found nowhere else on Earth. If the mountains are the bones of Geiranger, the waterfalls are its pulse. The climate of Western Norway is dominated by the North Atlantic current, which brings moisture-laden air from the sea. When this air hits the high plateaus of the Sunnmøre Alps, it releases its burden as snow and rain. This constant supply of water must find its way down to the sea. The most iconic of these descents is the Seven Sisters, De Syv Søstre. They are not merely one waterfall, but a choreographed ensemble. Depending on the season and the rate of snowmelt, you can count exactly 7 distinct streams cascading side by side. From a distance, they look like silver threads against the dark lichen-covered rock. Up close, they are a chaotic roar of mist and energy. The water falls from a height of approximately 250 meters. There is a scientific poetry to this. The potential energy stored in the high mountain lakes is converted into kinetic energy, creating a microclimate of constant moisture at the base, which allows rare mosses to thrive in the spray zone. Directly across the fjord is the Suter, Freyeren. While the sisters represent grace, the Sutor represents raw power. The rock formation behind the falls splits the water into a shape that uncannily resembles a bottle. Local folklore tells a story of a warrior who attempted to marry each of the sisters in turn, only to be rejected. In his despair, he turned to the bottle, and there he stands today, forever drinking to his lost loves. But there are others, less famous, but equally vital. The bridal veil, Brudesløret, falls so delicately that the slightest breeze can turn it into a shimmering, translucent cloud, drifting across the cliff face like fine silk. These waterfalls are more than just scenery. They are the primary source of the fjord's brackish water. The top layer of the fjord is often less salty than the depths because of the massive influx of fresh water from these falls, creating a unique stratified marine environment where specialized species of fish and plankton thrive. how did humans survive here? This is the question every traveler asks when looking at the tiny weathered houses perched on the hillock, the narrow ledges of the fjord walls. These are the mountain farms of Geiranger, Skagafjord, Knifsfjord, and Blomberg. Life on these farms was a masterpiece of human endurance. Take Skagafjord, for example. Situated 250 meters above the water, it was once one of the most productive farms in the region. The soil, enriched by volcanic minerals and glacial silt, was surprisingly fertile, but the cost of farming it was astronomical in terms of labor. There were no roads. Every sack of grain, every piece of furniture, and every child had to be carried up a treacherous path of stone steps and wooden ladders. The history of these farms is filled with tales that sound like myths. It is a documented fact that parents would tie their children to iron rings in the ground or heavy stones using ropes. This wasn't out of cruelty, but out of a desperate necessity to prevent them from tumbling over the edge during a moment of distracted play. Even the livestock, goats and sheep, had to be lowered by ropes to the few patches of grass that grew on the steepest inclines. The diet of these farmers was simple: fish from the fjord, potatoes from the small plots, and goat's milk. Isolation was absolute. In the winter, when the paths were covered in ice, a family at Skagafjord might not see another soul for 4 months. If someone fell ill, they either recovered by their own strength or they died. When a death occurred in winter, the body would be kept in a cold shed until the spring thaw allowed for a descent to the church in the village. By the early 20th century, the economic reality of such a life became unsustainable. One by one, the farms were abandoned. The last residents of Knifsfjord left in 1898, driven away by the constant threat of rock slides. Today, these farms are preserved as cultural heritage sites. Standing on the porch of Skagafjord today, looking down at the cruise ships that look like toy boats below, one feels a profound respect for the vertical pioneers who called this precipice home. The transition of Geiranger from a hidden agricultural outpost to a global tourist icon began in the late 19th century. In 1869, the first tourist ship, the SS North Cape, steamed into the fjord. The passengers, mostly wealthy British aristocrats and German royalty, were stunned. They had traveled the world, but they had never seen anything that combined the ruggedness of the Alps with the mystery of the deep sea. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany was perhaps the fjord's most influential fan. He visited Geiranger nearly every summer for over 20 years. His presence put the village on the map of European high society. To accommodate these royal guests, the local population had to adapt. They built the Union Hotel, a grand wooden structure that still stands today, symbolizing the birth of the Norwegian tourism industry. However, the real engineering marvel that opened Geiranger to the world was the Geiranger Road. Completed in 1889, it was an achievement that won a gold medal at the World Exhibition in Paris in 1900. The road used a corkscrew design to climb the steep mountainside, allowing horse-drawn carriages to ascend to the high mountain passes. Each stone was laid by hand, a testament to the skill of the Norwegian road builders. Today, the most famous section is the Eagle Road, Ørnevegen, opened in 1955. With its 11 hairpin bends, it rises from sea level to 620 meters in just a few kilometers. At the top, the Ørnevegen viewing platform provides the million-dollar view, a perfect perspective of the S-shaped curve of the fjord, the Seven Sisters, and the abandoned farms. It is a place where the mechanical ingenuity of man meets the organic majesty of nature. In a documentary about Geiranger, one cannot ignore the underlying tension that defines life in the valley. The beauty of the fjord is inseparable from its danger. The mountains are not static, they are moving. A few kilometers from the village lies the Åkneset mountain. For decades, a massive fissure has been widening on its flank. This isn't just a small crack, it's a structural failure in a section of the mountain measuring millions of cubic meters. Geologists know with 100% certainty that this section will eventually collapse into the fjord. When it happens, it will trigger a displacement wave, a tsunami. Because the fjord is so narrow and deep, the energy of the falling rock will have nowhere to dissipate. Computer models suggest a wave that could reach 80 meters in height near the site of the slide and still be 40 meters high by the time it reaches the village of Geiranger. The village would be destroyed in less than 10 minutes. This looming catastrophe has made Geiranger the most monitored mountain in the world. An array of sensors, ground-based radar, GPS stations, lasers, and seismic sensors track every micrometer of movement 24 hours a day. In the basement of a monitoring station in Stranda, scientists watch the data feeds. They have established a green, yellow, orange, red alert system. Because rockfalls of this magnitude usually provide warning signs in the form of accelerated movement. The plan is to evacuate the entire fjord population days before the final collapse. This sword of Damocles creates a strange psychological atmosphere. The locals live with the knowledge that their home could be erased in a single afternoon. Yet, they stay. They believe in the technology, and they believe in the mountain's rhythm. It is a reminder that in the grand geological scale, human civilization is a fleeting guest on a very restless planet. As we move into the 21st century, Geiranger faces a new challenge, its own popularity. On a peak summer day, as many as 5 cruise ships can be anchored in the fjord, bringing upwards of 10,000 visitors to a village of 250 residents. The environmental impact is significant. The deep, narrow shape of the fjord acts like a chimney. When massive ships burn heavy fuel oil, the exhaust fumes get trapped in a layer of cold air, creating a visible cloud of smog. This pollution is not just an eyesore. It threatens the delicate lichen and the health of the residents. Norway, a country that balances its oil wealth with a deep commitment to environmentalism, has decided to take a stand. The Norwegian parliament has mandated that the Geirangerfjord must be abzia by 2026. This is a revolutionary step. It means that the massive traditional cruise ships that currently dominate the waters will be banned unless they can operate on batteries, hydrogen, or other carbon-neutral fuels. This mandate is driving a wave of maritime innovation. We are seeing the rise of electric fjords. New ferries, like the future of the fjords, already operate on pure battery power. They glide through the water in near total silence, allowing passengers to hear the sound of the waterfalls rather than the thrum of a diesel engine. This transition is not just about technology, it's about returning the fjord to its original state, a place of silence and purity. The challenge is immense. Charging a massive cruise ship requires an enormous amount of electricity, which must be brought into the remote valley through upgraded power grids. But the goal is clear: to ensure that the sapphire of the north remains sapphire, not grey. To truly know Geiranger, you must see it when the tourists are gone. In November, the sun drops so low that it no longer rises above the mountain peaks surrounding the village. The polar night doesn't mean total darkness, but rather a world bathed in an eternal twilight of deep blues and purples. Winter in the fjord is a time of incredible stillness. The waterfalls, once so boisterous, freeze into massive blue sculptures. The Eagle Road is often closed by meters of snow, leaving the only access to the village via the ferry. The air becomes so crisp it feels like drinking cold water. For the locals, this is the time of curse, the Norwegian concept of coziness. It is a time for wood fires, storytelling, and preparing for the next cycle of life. Spring arrives with a violent energy. As the temperature rises, the snow melt begins. Small trickles turn into raging torrents. The sound of the fjord changes from the silence of winter to the roar of 1,000 different streams. This is the time when the Seven Sisters are at their most powerful, and the valley floor turns a vibrant neon green that seems almost artificial. Summer is the season of the midnight sun. Even though Geiranger is slightly south of the Arctic Circle, the nights never truly get dark. There is a golden hour that lasts for 5 hours. The water becomes a mirror, reflecting the snow-capped peaks so perfectly that it's hard to tell where the rock ends and the water begins. As our journey ends, we look back at the Geirangerfjord, not just as a destination, but as a lesson. It teaches us about the immense power of nature, the slow grind of glaciers, the sudden violence of rock slides, and the persistent flow of water. It teaches us about human resilience, the farmers who defied gravity, and the engineers who conquered the cliffs. But most of all, it teaches us about our responsibility. Geiranger is a UNESCO World Heritage Site because it is a classic landscape, a piece of the world's original design. In an era of rapid climate change and global industrialization, preserving such a place is an act of defiance. It is a statement that some things are too beautiful to be lost to the march of progress. The fjord remains. It has seen the ice come and go. It has seen the Vikings row their longships through its mist. It has seen the steamships of Kaisers and the electric ferries of the future. And through it all, it has remained indifferent to human history, a vertical labyrinth of stone and water that continues to inspire awe in anyone who enters its gates. The sun sets over the peaks of Dalsnibbe, casting one last ray of light onto the Suta waterfall. The water continues its eternal fall. The mountain continues its slow, silent shift. And the Geirangerfjord, the crown jewel of the Norwegian wilderness, waits for the next chapter in its million-year story.